Strip the legend down to its hardest, smallest image, and you get the claim in the title, a 75-yard heart shot tied to the name Wild Bill Hickok, retold as proof that one man could do the impossible with cold hands and steady nerve. But a shot like that, whether repeated with perfect accuracy by every teller or not, does not stand on its own. It only makes sense if it comes from a full weapon system, from habits built long before the moment, from a way of carrying, maintaining, choosing, and trusting tools under pressure. That is the real story here. Not magic, not myth floating free from the body. What was carried, why it was carried, and why it worked when the margin for error was almost gone. No one survives violent conditions because of a single heroic instant. Survival begins earlier, in the ordinary repetition that never makes its way into legend. Before a famous shot becomes part of a public reputation, there has to be a private education in danger, distance, timing, and hesitation. There has to be an inherited way of looking at the world, one that treats tools not as ornaments, but as extensions of judgment. In a life like the one attached to Hickok's name that matters more than flourish, the weapon is never just the weapon. It is a decision about range, a decision about speed, a decision about what happens if the first answer fails. The future legend is not built by swagger first. It is built by the quiet acceptance that survival belongs to people who prepare for ugly, close, fast problems before they ever speak about reputation. That is why the loadout has to be understood as a system instead of a collection. The first layer is the one meant to be reached without thought, the weapon that lives where the hand can find it under strain. The second layer exists because hands slip, angles collapse, and first plans do not always live long enough to become second chances. The next layer answers a different problem entirely. Distance, cover, the widening gap between what a sidearm can do quickly and what a longer gun can do with authority. And beneath all of that sits the oldest rule in violent work. When mechanisms fail, when powder fails, when space closes so brutally that aiming becomes a luxury, metal without moving parts still matters. That is why any serious survival system keeps a blade in the conversation, even when firearms dominate the legend. The early test of that idea is never elegant. It is not a polished duel in a clean line. It is confusion at close range. It is the moment when one threat becomes two, then becomes motion, then becomes the terrible realization that there is no room left for fantasy. In that kind of pressure, a blade is not romance. It is insurance. It proves that a practical weapon system is built around failure points, not ideal conditions. If a firearm jams, empties, tangles, gets trapped against the body, or simply cannot be brought to bear fast enough, the person who survives is the one who never believed the primary tool was enough by itself. That is not theatrical. It is ugly, mechanical truth. And once that truth is learned up close, it never leaves the hand. Then come the signature sidearms, the weapons that sit at the core of the story because they sit at the core of immediate action. Their importance is not just that they can kill. Many tools can kill. Their importance is that they are available now. They live inside the first second of danger. They reward consistency more than improvisation. The exact carry angle matters less here than the logic behind it. The grip has to be found the same way every time. The draw has to clear without wasted movement, and the weapon has to arrive in line with the eye before panic can steal the body's discipline. That is why a real sidearm becomes personal in a way a borrowed one never can. The hand has to know where it sits. The wrist has to know how it rises. Under true stress, Familiarity is a kind of speed no crowd can see, but it is the speed that decides whether the weapon becomes useful or stays trapped in the category of legend. Technically, a sidearm worthy of such a reputation has to balance several demands that usually fight each other. It has to be substantial enough to settle in the hand rather than skip wildly with each shot. It has to be simple enough to trust when dirt, wear, sweat, and fear all try to interfere with function. It has to be accurate enough to matter beyond arm's length, but not so specialized that it loses its value in the close, ugly distances where most decisions are made. And above all, it has to make sense for the person who carries it. Range on paper is meaningless without confidence in recoil, sight picture, trigger break, and recovery. That is where ballistic stops being an abstract word and becomes an intimate fact. A frightening shot at long distance is not frightening because the bullet traveled. It is frightening because a human being controlled all the variables required to make that travel count. But hardware by itself never deserves the full credit. Metal does not generate legend without discipline attached to it. If a weapon keeps working in hard use, it is because someone cleaned it, checked it, respected what wear can do, and refused to trust luck more than routine. If a draw looks effortless, that is usually the residue of repetition. Practice is what turns a tool from possession into capability. Not one dramatic session, not one burst of vanity, constant work, the same reach, the same lift, the same insistence that the body should solve simple problems before the mind is even fully ready. There is no romance in maintenance, and that is exactly why it matters. The people who last are often the ones who treat readiness like a chore rather than a performance. Mastery is rarely glamorous while it is being built. It only becomes glamorous later, after it saves a life. The first real proof of the sidearm layer comes when more than one threat has to be accounted for at once. That is where legends usually start lying because crowds prefer invincibility to competence. But a grounded reading is more interesting. In a multi-opponent problem, the weapon matters, yes, yet timing matters more. Shot order matters more. Movement matters more. The ability to keep the weapon in the fight after the first discharge matters more. A plausible performance is not supernatural accuracy. From the first heartbeat to the last, it is the controlled management of chaos. It is the refusal to freeze. It is hitting soon enough, recovering fast enough, and staying mentally organized longer than the people trying to kill you. That is how hardware earns its status without becoming folklore beyond recognition. And because anyone honest about violence knows the first layer can still fail, the system expands. A hidden backup weapon is not an admission of weakness. It is an admission of reality. A smaller gun, tucked closer, changes the emotional geometry of a bad moment because it keeps the story from ending when the obvious weapon is gone, lost, blocked, or emptied. Later alternatives may appear as technology changes or preferences shift, but the principle stays stubbornly the same. The weapon a person knows best usually remains the true center of the system. New tools contempt, reputation contempt, fashion contempt, familiarity still wins. In practical survival, the hand returns to what it trusts. That is why the main sidearms remain dominant even when backup and variation enter the picture. Reliability is not only mechanical, it is psychological. Then distance changes the problem, and the loadout has to change with it. A sidearm is a compromise made portable. A longer gun is what happens when compromise becomes too expensive. If the gap opens, if the target is no longer close enough for instinctive work, if precision and retained force begin to matter more than speed from the hip, the weapon system scales upward. One answer is the repeating long gun, built to keep pressure on a problem that does not end with one shot. Another is the heavy single shot option, slower in rhythm but severe in authority when one deliberate hit matters more than rapid follow up. These are not replacements for the sidearms, they are extensions of the same philosophy. Different range, different handling, same rule. Choose the tool that fits the problem before the problem chooses for you. And still the blade returns because the closer the body gets to danger, the more every mechanical advantage starts to narrow. That is why the knife never leaves the full system, even when it leaves the center of the story. It is the final answer for failure points. It is for entanglement, surprise, confinement, and the raw animal truth that not every crisis announces itself at a distance polite enough for sights and measured breath. In a legend built around firearms, the blade serves another purpose too. It reminds us that violence is not clean just because history prefers to remember gun smoke. The last defensive layer is never elegant. It is there because the ideal version of events is rarely the version a person gets. At some point, competence crosses an invisible line and becomes public identity. That is where the decisive showdown enters because reputations do not spread from private efficiency alone. They spread from a single image dramatic enough to carry the whole system inside it. This is where the famous shot belongs, not as magic, as compression. A controlled decision made under pressure at a range long enough to expose every weakness in sight, nerve, and judgment becomes the trigger for a national reputation because it gives the public an easy symbol for a much harder truth. The truth is slower and less romantic. A shot like that only exists at the end of training, familiarity, maintenance, carry logic, and repeated proof under strain. The public sees one bullet. The real story is everything packed in behind it. At some point, competence crosses an invisible line and becomes public identity. That is where the decisive showdown enters because reputations do not spread from private efficiency alone. They spread from a single image dramatic enough to carry the whole system inside it. This is where the famous shot belongs, not as magic, as compression. A controlled decision made under pressure at a range long enough to expose every weakness in sight, nerve, and judgment becomes the trigger for a national reputation because it gives the public an easy symbol for a much harder truth. The truth is slower and less romantic. A shot like that only exists at the end of training, familiarity, maintenance, carry logic, and repeated proof under strain. The public sees one bullet. The real story is everything packed in behind it. That is also the moment when myth begins interfering with reality. Once a man's name starts walking into rooms ahead of him, reputation itself becomes another weapon. It can deter, it can unbalance, it can shorten a confrontation before metal is ever touched, but it can also distort the man carrying it. People test legends. Crowds amplify errors. Chaos grows around famous competence because everybody arrives with a story already loaded in the chamber, in an enforcement phase that matters. A feared name changes the field before a weapon is drawn, yet it also increases the chance that every bad second will be interpreted through exaggeration. This is where the honest narrative has to resist the temptation to celebrate destruction. Violence has collateral cost. Control is never total. Flexible handling under stress is impressive precisely because stress keeps producing variables no system can completely erase. And this is the deepest correction any serious documentary voice owes the audience. A legendary loadout does not mean an invulnerable man. It means a man who understood his tools and his world well enough to improve his odds. That is different, crucially different. Once that distinction is lost, myth starts eating evidence. The sidearms become talismans, the long gun becomes prophecy, the blade becomes theatrical decoration. But in practice, every one of those tools only ever bought something temporary: time, space, initiative, hesitation in the other man, confidence in the user. That is enough to change history in a single instant. It is not enough to conquer chance forever. Anyone who tells the story otherwise is selling a fantasy, not explaining a weapon system. The final ambush in any legend of practical violence matters for one reason above all others. It destroys the childish belief that the right weapons can solve every angle of human danger. A system built for draw speed, backup access, range adaptation, and last-ditch survival can still be defeated by surprise, position, timing, or betrayal. That does not disprove the system. It proves its limits, and limits are where reality lives. The end of the story does not erase what worked. It clarifies what worked in practice and what never could. A practical loadout can help a person survive the fight he sees coming. It cannot promise salvation from the moment he does not. What survives after that is always larger than the man. The tools, or the stories attached to the tools, endure. Their lines, their weight, their imagined wear, their place in public memory all keep growing even after the hand that trusted them is gone. That is how legacy expands. Not cleanly, not honestly, every time. The myth becomes easier to carry than the truth. The truth says the famous shot, the famous name, the famous confidence all rested on repetition, maintenance, judgment, and a layered respect for failure points. The myth says a born killer touched a weapon and certainty followed. Only one of those versions teaches anything worth keeping. So the real verdict on the loadout tied to Wild Bill Hickok is not that it created a supernatural gunfighter. It is that it formed a practical survival architecture around the body and mind of a man who understood consequences. Primary weapons for the first emergency, backup weapons for the second, longer guns for distance, a blade for collapse, maintenance to preserve function, practice to preserve access, judgment to decide which layer belonged to which moment, reputation, eventually as one more force multiplier, but never a substitute for skill. That is why the system worked in practice, not because legend made it untouchable, but because it was built around the possibility that everything could go wrong. And that is why the 75-yard heart shot remains such a powerful image, not because it asks us to believe in a miracle, because it dares us to look past the miracle and see the machinery underneath it. The shot, whether polished by retelling or held closer to hard reality, points back to the same conclusion every serious reading reaches in the end. The frightening thing was never just the bullet. It was the full chain behind the bullet, the carrying, the discipline, the readiness, the acceptance of failure points, the calm selection of the right tool for the right range, and the refusal to confuse confidence with fantasy. That is what the legend hides. That is what the loadout reveals.